Last week we spoke about, we read and talked about what Solomon had to say to the youth, at least part of it. And we read this from Ecclesiastes, and I want to continue a bit on this valuable and useful information for youth, but actually for everyone who has to deal with young people as well. After last week's message, one might wonder, what did Solomon know? Or was all this just theory? Well, first of all, it's in the Bible, so we may rest assured that it's correct what we read. But apart from that, Solomon had his own experiences. He knew what he was talking about. And he wrote it all down so that we don't need to go through it ourselves and make the same mistakes. If only all young people knew this and lived by it. Solomon tried everything, and he shared his experiences. And if we continue in Ecclesiastes 2 in verse 1, and I render it in my own words, he writes there, "I said to myself, come now, let me try pleasure and enjoy myself." But it was all emptiness. He gives his conclusion immediately. It's empty, it's chasing shadows, it's unfulfilling, and it is fruitless. He continues then in the next verse, "I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it bring?" Young people often think that the life, the high life, that it is cool and that it is worth everything. And Solomon calls it madness. Seeking pleasure only for the purpose of pleasure is madness. And afterwards he sees that it had brought nothing, maybe hangover. It was a total waste of time. And thus Solomon decides to do an experiment. He is going to try what will bring him satisfaction and well-being. Now we have to remember that he was the son of a king and king after that. And so he had endless possibilities to try and to do whatever he desired. Sky was the limit. And so he writes what he had done, and that continues in Ecclesiastes 2 verses 3 through 10. And again rendered in my own words here, by exception in this message. "I thought by myself to seek pleasure with alcohol while I kept my wisdom, and to keep doing foolish things until I would find out what was good for everyone to do during their short lives. I did great works too. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself, and I made gardens and parks, and I planted all kinds of trees in them, and I made pools to water the trees. I had servants and maids, and they were even born in my house. And I had lots of animals, more than anyone before me in Jerusalem. And I had great wealth of silver and gold that I gathered from the people. I ordered singers and musicians of all sorts, and I had lots of women and girlfriends to have pleasure with. And I enjoyed it all. I was great, greater than all those before me in Jerusalem. But still I kept my wisdom. And everything I desired, I did and obtained. I enjoyed it all. That was my reward for all that I did." So Solomon lived life in the fast lane, as we say. He drank lots of wine, and he partied many nights with women and music. He spent money on whatever he could think of. He planned, he engineered, he built, he gardened, he farmed. He bought and sold and collected all kinds of special things. And he found the best musicians and singers, the popular bands of his time. And he brought them to Jerusalem to play for him. And he literally had hundreds of wives and concubines. It was truly, you can say, in a way, sex and drugs and rock and roll. It is the life many, maybe I should say most young people in the West at least indulge in. Partying, concerts, music, drinking, smoking. They do it like there is no tomorrow. And they do everything that comes to mind. And if they can't do it for real, then they do it at least online. It's a life without morals. It's a life that is frivolous. And they may not, like Solomon, have hundreds of partners, literally, but they do so virtually in many cases. The youth culture and society as a whole is highly sexualized. Children are bombarded with immorality at an age where hormones are running wild anyway. On top of that, they make things worse by often listening to music for many hours a day through their earbuds. How often do you not see people walking around with these earbuds in their ears, which, by the way, is very unhealthy because of the electromagnetic radiation that goes through your head. But apart from that, they listen to music, quote-unquote music, I want to say, for many hours every single day. And we talked in the past about how these syncopatic beats of modern pop music, practically all songs have these syncopatic beats, they release in the body, in the frontal lobe of the brain, so-called gonadotropins, which are hormones. Essentially, they are sex hormones. So they enhance sexual arousal. So this is caused by the music that young people listen to, on top of all the hormonal changes that are going on in their bodies to begin with. And of course, when they are partying or going to a concert, this is the same thing. And the music is so loud and penetrating that it's really very strong, this release of this gonadotropins. And this is not something new, it's ancient knowledge. And it is part of the reason why we see in ancient cultures and in tribes, we see these drums, the tribal drums, voodoo drum beats, the dancing with these drum beats, and they are all syncopatic drum beats that cause this same effect that I just described. So maybe something to think about as young people, but also as parents when you allow your children to listen to this music for so many hours, or allow them to go partying and to concerts. Now, after all this, Solomon then says in chapter 2, verse 11, "Then I looked at all the things I had done, at all my work, and it was clear. It was all emptiness, trying to catch the wind. It had not brought anything." He saw it had not brought him anything, nothing. In the things that really matter in life, he had gained nothing. It was all meaningless. And it's the kind of feeling many people have when they look back on their youth. They see it sort of as wasted time. Of course, there are nice memories and pleasurable things that we can maybe think of, but all in all, many conclude that they could have done so much more, and could have made it so much more useful and productive, and could have profited from that later on. Often there is emotional and physical damage that will not go away. And of course we are even more, we realize this even more when we become Christians later on. Now, what makes Solomon's case so special is that in all of this, he mentions this twice in the piece that we read, in all of this, he kept his wisdom. And that can only have been through God, who had given him this wisdom to begin with. We can read that in 1 Kings chapter 3. This understanding stayed with him, no matter what he did. And there is, of course, a difference with the youth in general, or people in general. When they indulge in these things, we cannot really say the wisdom stayed with them. But for Solomon it did. And this made it possible that he could record his conclusions. He could sort of, while he was in the midst of it, he could also observe himself from outside, as it were, and come to the conclusions that he came to, and write them down to our benefit. And then in verse 17 he repeats and strengthens his conclusion. And it's actually very shocking if you read it. It says there, "Therefore I hated life, because everything done in this world was distressing me. Everything is emptiness and chasing shadows." Now maybe you recognize this from celebrities and influencers, online influencers, how they often, in spite of their success and their wealth, they are depressed. They may have millions of followers on social media, many hundreds of thousands of views every day. They may make lots of money, which makes it possible for them to do whatever they want to do. But in spite of all this, they are depressed. And they resort to drugs and alcohol. And ever so often they commit suicide. It's maybe not on a daily, but on a weekly basis we can read these stories. Solomon felt so depressed, and after all he had done and experienced and tried, he had achieved nothing but sorrow. And he comes even to the point that he says that he hates life. Now, why is that? Why is that? The answer to that question is very simple. That is so because everything he had done was useless because he had done it without God. It is God who makes a difference in life. It is God who puts a real meaning to pleasure, to work, to beauty. And without him, it will all become useless and eventually perish. So that is why this question that I posed also last week, and I probably will repeat it in the future, this question is so important. How is your relationship with Jesus going? If that is not right, then everything else is wrong. These words that Solomon gave us are not just theory. Solomon knew what he was talking about. He had experienced it. And these words are recorded in Scripture so that we can learn and do not make the same mistakes. A person who lives a pure life in close relationship to Jesus can and will find true joy in life. Something that is true, enjoyable, lasting. Something completely different than the superficial pleasures of the world that must be renewed with something more edgy all the time in order to feel the same thrill. And that causes lasting damage, physical damage, emotional damage, psychological damage, spiritual damage. Those who truly know what life is about will live a godly life. If you can grasp this truth while you are young, it will save you a lot of wasted time, a lot of sorrow, and a lot of regrets. The call is very simple. Jesus says, "Follow me." And if you truly do, with all your heart, then you can call yourself a Christian. And that is one of the other questions I asked last week. Are you a Christian? It's so easy to say, yes, of course. Well, that means that Jesus rules your life. He is king of your heart. and you are following him in everything. So then, how is your relationship with Jesus going? These are things we have to continue to keep considering ourselves. It's really pressed upon me to emphasize this, and so I also did this in the newsletter that I sent out this week. It's really vital, and the time is critical. We are almost there, and so we have to be sure that all this is in order. And if we are young, or if we have young children, or are dealing with young children, look at them, and we don't want them to be lost. It's a shame. This is not why they were put into this world, and this is not why we have responsibilities over them. And so these words, these lessons that we learn from Solomon are very, very, very important. So I really want to urge everyone to ponder on these things, and also to take action in your own life, or in the lives that of those that are under your care. Amen.